Okay. So, this is lesson 72. Title is Annas and Caiaphas. But we're starting still back in the Garden of Gethsemane. If we go back, remember, Jesus walked from Jerusalem with his disciples from the Last Supper. Judas had left. He walked and preached and taught them. They made it to the garden. Jesus prayed while they slept. Then they awoke, and here comes this band of soldiers, with swords and staves, making noise. And they come there, and Judas has greeted Jesus with a kiss. So they know who it is they're looking for. Jesus, with one word, I am he, or a few words, caused them all to fall over to show that they were powerless. But yet he was going to go willingly. And now you can imagine the soldiers coming forward, maybe very cautiously, ready to grab Jesus. And we saw that, what did Peter draw out? Grant? A sword. Okay, so let's pick it up there and see what happens here. Okay, so John chapter 18. Okay, we'll read a few verses here, starting at verse 10. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Put up thy sword into thy sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall not I drink it? Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus, bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which was the high priest the same year. Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews, and it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Again, we said last time, what was Peter's goal in drawing out that sword? What did he want to do to that man? Jennifer? Kill him. Probably land square on top of his skull and crush it. Split him in two if he could. Teach that man to stay away from his master. Instead, the man must have moved slightly. Instead, Peter sliced off his ear, probably bleeding, pain, and sorrow. What did Jesus immediately do, Logan? Picked up that ear. You can imagine being in the multitude. Can you imagine seeing somebody heal an ear that's just been cut off? They were astounded, I'm sure amazed. And then Jesus doesn't leave it at that, but he rebukes Peter, hollers at him, chastises him. Okay? Peter's about to start a war here, a battle. What kind of battle do we fight? Faith? Spiritual battle on this earth. We always have to be ready. What weapons and what are we outfitted with for that spiritual battle? What does the Bible say, Garrett? The armor of God. Put on that armor. The breastplate and the helmet. Sword and shield. Feet shod. Skirt of truth. Put those things on, ready to go out and do battle. Good. And that's what Peter was ready to do here. Not just a spiritual battle. He was ready for a physical, earthly battle. Now, there was something wrong with Peter doing that here. If Peter had succeeded, if he had killed Malchus, and other disciples had drawn out their swords and began to thrust them through into the crowd, and the crowd of soldiers with their swords and staves, they too begin to battle back and probably would have the victory because they outnumber them. Because Jesus is a leader or part of the band of disciples, what would his problem be? What would the problem be here? I asked you on that paper. What would the issue be? Jennifer, why would Jesus not be able to die on the cross to save us from our sins? Faith. All right, he there would have been part of that group. Okay? He can't just say, well, I didn't strike anybody. It's not going to be the case. When we're part of a group, when we sin as part of a group. We saw that so many times in the Old Testament. Give an example. An Old Testament example of when all of Israel was punished for maybe the sins of a portion of them. Garrett?
There was the man who stole from the ruins of the city, and the whole group of Israelites was punished.
Achan stole gold or silver and a robe and other things and took them back to his tent after defeating Jericho, even after God expressly said not to. All of Israel was punished. Okay? So we see that here. Jesus would not have been innocent. Okay? He would have been guilty too. And then he would have been rightfully judged in front of the Sanhedrin. He would have been rightfully condemned by the Jews. Again, an important point to make to you as young people as you get older, get into high school and have the opportunity to move out and about with your vehicles or different groups, hang out with friends. Be careful. If your friends are getting into something that's no good business and you're there, you're just as guilty. By your silence, by not walking away, you are guilty before the laws of the land as well. Have the courage to stand up and do what's right. Leave. Don't be part of that. Okay? And so Jesus here rebukes Peter. He's not silent, but he rebukes him and tells him to put away the sword. And the disciples then take off and flee. If you go to the book of Mark, go to Mark chapter 14. And there we see, again, if we go back, 46, and they laid their hands on them, and one of them that drew a sword smote a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Jesus speaks here, verse 48, Are ye come out as against a thief with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. What did the disciples do here, Kimberly? They were afraid. They fled. Why did they abandon him? They're confused. They don't know what to do. Megan? Jesus, it appeared to them that Jesus had just refused their help. Do we refuse help? Well, I don't know. Sometimes we might say, no, let me do this by myself. Sometimes we take the help. Yes, I'd love to have you help me. And that's what it appears to the disciples. They're ready to defend Jesus. And it's as though he's refused them. And now, when he's captured, they flee. Run off in separate directions because their master has gone willingly. Okay. And then we read there in John chapter 13, who did they take Jesus to? These soldiers now have fulfilled their duties. They've captured Jesus, and they bring him where? Where do we read in John? Or to who? What man first? Emma. Before Caiaphas. Micah? Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas. They take him to his house. Annas was probably a very well-respected, high-ranking officer in the Sanhedrin. And so it made sense. Maybe Caiaphas is busy, something else, or out somewhere. But bring him to Annas' house. He, at one time, was probably in charge of all the Sanhedrin. But also, as was common in those days, we don't see this very much in our lives here in the United States, in our white Caucasian families. If we were to go to India, if we were to go to other parts of the world, we would find this. The grandparents and the parents live with the children. It's not uncommon in India for parents when they build their home or have their home. Think of the Butine homestead. Mom and Dad, you, Brody, and Haley. So mom and dad say, hey, the kids are getting a little bit older now. Pretty soon Haley could start dating and get married. We're going to build an addition on the house for Haley and her family to move into. And over here, well, since we're spending the money on building, let's just build 2 more additions at the same time for Garrett and Brody down the road. If they get married, they have children, we'll all live together in one big complex. Who kind of does that around here that we see? We see Logan? Amish? Okay? Not uncommon there. Where do we shove our old people, Faith? You want old people living in your house so you can wipe them up and clean them up? So where do you shove them? Nursing homes, right? It's very common to take care of your loved ones. And so it's probably very common for, again I say white because it's not uncommon. You get into the poor neighborhoods or Asian neighborhoods or African American, you see many families living together in one household. But we don't typically do that. They probably did in the Bible time, so we could also assume that Annas' home was attached to the home of Caiaphas as well. But anyways, they bring him before Annas. Now, the Sanhedrin, what don't they believe in? You remember what we said, these men? Jews, but they don't believe in a fundamental principle of Christianity that has to do with Christ. Faith? They don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. So these are the men that are called upon to condemn Jesus or to find what he's guilty with. So Caiaphas has an important office here. And while we're in Mark chapter 14, if we go back to where we were reading there we go. Verse 53. And they led Jesus away to the high priest, that's Caiaphas, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and elders and the scribes. They know what's coming. Jesus has promised to betray them. They're probably ready at a moment's notice to run in to get together for a meeting in the middle of the night. And Peter followed him afar off, even into the palace of the high priest. So it's a palace. And he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. And the chief priests and all the council sought for witness against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. For many bare false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. And there arose certain and bare false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made with hands. But neither so did their witness agree together. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? But he held his peace and answered nothing. Again, the high priest asked him and said unto him, art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of glory. Then the high priest rent his clothes and saith, what need we any further witnesses? Ye have heard the blasphemy. What think ye? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. And some began to spit on him, and to cover his face, and to buffet him, and to say unto him, prophesy. And the servants did strike him with the palms of their hands. Jesus is brought here before Caiaphas into this palace. The home of Caiaphas is a palace because he's probably wrongfully come into the position by using his power and foolishness, false teachings to gain riches and build that up. But here Jesus is brought. Peter follows, goes in by the servants to warm himself there by the fire. And all of them are together. And what are they looking for? They begin to bring in what kind of people? Kimberly. What kind of people are brought in before the Sanhedrin? What do they call them? People who are going to give some evidence about maybe something Jesus has done wrong. Call those people in a trial. Well, the jury will decide, and that's what the Sanhedrin are, but the people who come before who tell maybe what they saw you do. Courtney. Witnesses. They brought in witnesses. And what was the problem with each witness that came before the Sanhedrin to say something about Jesus? Megan. All right. Sometimes we focus on the fact that it was false. But even if it was false, we know back Jezebel, how did she use witnesses? False witnesses. Remember? Garrett?
To accuse the man who owned the vineyard.
Yeah, what's the man who owned the vineyard's name? Starts with an N. No, Faith? Naboth. Right? She said, come in and tell this lie. And because two people came in and told the same lie, they could say, well, he must have done it now. Same thing here. Witness after witness after witness after witness is brought in before Jesus. It shows that Jesus has no sin. They can't even agree on their lies. How hard would it be to bring in two men and find two of them lying the same way, but they can't. Finally, Caiaphas speaks to Jesus, and he says, asks him questions. Jesus finally asks him, who are you? Are you the Son of God? And Jesus says, yes. Now Caiaphas says, now all of us have heard it. We've got enough witnesses. Guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And that's the case there. Okay? He's found guilty. Denied any resurrection in the existence of the spiritual world. So, why would God, I asked that question, why would God put a man like that in the position of a judge? Garrett?
Because he would surely find the best way to get these arrested.
All right. Many of the judges in our land are ungodly. Why would God allow those men to rule over us and unjustly make laws against us? It's part of his plan, first of all. Okay? But there's an ultimate goal there. We need Jesus to be condemned to death. Now, the Sanhedrin, they're a unique group. We said they don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, but they also have some rules. Just like in the law of the United States, there are certain rules. We could only hold you the police can only hold you in prison for so long until they have to let you go unless they accuse you of a crime. Okay? They can't do things that are unreasonable in their questioning or torture or any of those things. They can't falsely accuse you of things. They can't search your materials without first getting permission from you or a judge. So there's all of these things going on. Well, the Sanhedrin was breaking many of those laws too. What laws were they breaking? Does anybody know? Megan? Say it a little louder. At night the trial was happening. Very good. They've come in the darkness of night. The Sanhedrin may not meet in the night. Okay?
They arrested him before accusing him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right? That's not their laws, though. We're looking at their own laws here so that we can show that is probably a good point. But we're looking at what things they're contradicting themselves. Micah? It was done in private. They might not do it in the priest's palace, but they had to be done in the public judgment hall for all to see. Okay, a judge can't try a case in his home. He has to do it in the courthouse. Good? Anybody know anything else that they did that was wrong? They might not condemn a man to death. They can find him guilty and throw him in the slammer, but they cannot deal with cases where they might condemn a man to death. But that's not, they don't follow that rule as well. Okay? And then, like Garrett said, I think that's a pretty good point. You can't arrest a man without first having charges against him, which is what they did. So this trial is unfair, it's illegal, and it's unorganized. They could find no good witnesses. And then, what do the people do once they condemn Jesus to death? What do they begin to do? Garrett?
They began
Mock and ridicule him. And I ask that there. If you go back to Isaiah 53, verse 7, what part just came true during this trial? What did Jesus do? That's exactly fulfilling that verse. Garrett? As a lamb before a shears is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. Jesus did not speak. Kept it quiet. And he willingly went to the cross for you and for me. He willingly died. And that's a very beautiful thing. Okay. Now, I asked there, too, many parables Jesus gave that showed what would happen. What's one parable that is coming true here? Megan? Okay, and in the parable of Vineyard with a husbandman, when the landowner, the vineyard owner goes away, what happens, Megan? All right. That parable of the vineyard, yes. The husbandman sends his servants, picture the prophets, they are killed. And finally he says, I'll send my son. But they kill him too. So we see that here as well. Good.